All right, here we go. You are about to enjoy a Firearms Radio Network podcast. The views and opinions expressed in this podcast are those of the individual co-hosts and do not reflect the official policy or position of the Firearms Radio Network and or their employers. Viewer discretion is advised. This is especially true on live shows. If you like what we're doing and would like to help support the show, visit patreon.com/afteractionproject. If you'd like to throw us some free support and appreciation, we would greatly appreciate a 5-star review on iTunes or anywhere you're listening to this podcast. And tonight's episode, just like every episode, is brought to you by the Firearms Radio Network. Be sure to check out the other great podcasts on the Firearms Radio Network by visiting firearms-radio.net. And our other show sponsor is the RangeBuddy.App. If you guys haven't had a chance to download that, I think you're missing out. You should get over there. It's a free app with some freemium features to it. So the free version gets you three drills for each one of the different categories. So the B8 targets, the USPSA targets, all that good stuff, as well as the featured drill of the month. We're starting to get some partnerships going with a couple different groups. Yes, there it is. And we'll be using the featured drill of the month. We are trying to get our first giveaway for the October drill of the month. So it's absolutely free to participate in that. Just got to download the RangeBuddy app. And so let's get into what everybody is here for. That's the show. And tonight we are joined by Mike Ox, and we will be discussing his See Quicker, Shoot Quicker seminar. Be sure to visit him at visiontraining.com. And before we get too far into the seminar, Mike, introduce yourself to our listeners. We were talking about in the pre-show how you have a ton, just a depth of work and knowledge and expertise on all things vision related and really how it applies to the application of firearms. So I'm sure I didn't do as good of a service introducing yourself as I should have. So feel free to backfill that in and explain a little bit more about who the heck you are.
No, you did a great job. Basically the backstory is just over 10 years ago, I was starting to have the consequences of way too many concussions catch up with me. And I had vertigo almost every night. My eyes weren't tracking correctly. I had balance issues, hand-eye coordination issues, was falling more than I should and racking up even more concussions. And it really sucked. And I had to figure out whether that was my new normal or whether there was something I could do. And I ended up getting hooked up with some performance neurology coaches in Phoenix. And over the course of between 30 and 60 minutes, I hadn't been able to do a single push-up without a lot of pain in the prior 6 months. And with 20, 30 minutes of vision drills, I was able to do 20 push-ups without pain. And that got my attention, and I didn't understand what had happened. I didn't believe what had happened other than the fact that it did, and that I could reproduce it by doing the drills in the coming days and weeks. And so I started trying to use some of these drills with firearm students, and I got ridiculous results. And so that got me to where I was really interested now. And so for the last 9 years, I've trained neurology with the Wharton Neurology Program, with Z Health, with Next Level Neuro, and a few other organizations, and do over 100. This year, I'll probably end up with about 170 hours of live training in neurology continuing education. So it's an incredible field, because everything that we do in shooting, all of the tactics that we practice, all of the techniques, they're all built on a foundation of neurology and vision. And when we get vision working correctly, all of the other training that we do is way, way more effective.
Hey, so Mike, real quick, I want to say for the viewers, if they see me sitting here kicking back with my hands behind my head, I'm battling a pinched nerve for about a week now, so I'm kind of in a little bit of pain myself. So for the viewers, if they see me and they're like, "Man, look at this lazy dude just sitting here kicking back," that's why. So just want to say that in the beginning. But Mike, I wanted to start off with a question of, you explained kind of why you got into this. Do you have a medical background, and have you taken any of this stuff and like put it into more of a medical thing, or is this just solely for the purpose of kind of shooting and firearms now?
That's a good question. My medical background is just as EMT and ski patrol and backcountry medicine, not as a doctor or anything in a clinical setting. And on the now side, I speak at neurology conferences, which is kind of weird because I'm the only person other than the wait staff who isn't a medical professional, and so do that, and then I work with executives and athletes outside of shooting to basically get everything in their brain working at an optimal level so that they can do everything that they do with less effort and have more energy, either in the fourth quarter or whatever the equivalent is for athletes, or at the end of the day for CEOs and business owners.
So a lot of performance-based firearms instructors, one of the adages that you'll hear them say is, your vision drives the gun, right? So specifically when
Yep.
we're talking about transitioning from target to target, right? Like the eyes lead the way. And I've seen one or two other guys, like Brandon Powers comes to mind with the is it the Brock string?
Yeah, there's a Brock string. I've got a version of it that's a retractable one that it's a very, very important tool for vision training.
My kids, my two oldest kids, they've gone through vision therapy for a few years now, and it's something that just watching them go through it, I look back and I was like, man, I probably needed a whole bunch of that because I'm not very aware of my body sometimes and how it interacts with space, so like my proprioception is it's not always dialed into what it should be. So I've seen it firsthand what vision training and vision training exercises can do to improve athleticism, overall coordination, and then academically as well.
Yeah.
As a dude that shoots guns, what are some of those vision exercises that I could do? I need low hanging fruit stuff, right? Like I need minimal input, maximum output kind of stuff, man. Like my kids were going to vision training for 1 or 2 hour sessions on a weekly basis, and I don't have the bandwidth or the time to do that. So what are some exercises that we can do to really improve our performance?
Yeah, it all depends on what you're trying to do and where you're at as a shooter. I mean, that has drills on it that are probably similar to what your kids are doing in vision therapy. I sell it for at home for performance purposes. And with that, there's drills that you can do to increase activity in the prefrontal cortex, which helps you learn faster, pay attention more, and helps either reading and book learning or physical learning stick longer after each session. For most people, I've done a drill with over 1,000 shooters where I have them shoot a course of fire either with recoiling laser or with actual firearms, and then do a 3 to 5 minute sequence of vision drills, and then do the course of fire again. And the average improvement in over 1,000 shooters is 20% in speed and accuracy. And what it is basically getting the senses all on the same page. And it's that drill from the video that I sent you. And basically, what you do is you stare at the corner of your thumbnail, and while you're staring at it, you turn your head side to side while keeping your fingernail in focus, and then nodding your head up and down, and then tilting your head ear to shoulder. And you don't want to do this with a pinched nerve in your neck. But what that does, very simply, is we've got 3 systems that are telling our brain where our body is in space and where we are in relationship to our targets, whether it's something that we want to avoid, something we want to shoot, something we want to throw a ball at, whatever. And those 3 systems are our visual system, our inner ear, vestibular system or balance, and hand-eye coordination. And for most people, those 3 systems are sending the brain different information about where we are in space. And when that happens, any time that we move, from the time that we wake up until the time we go to bed, there's conflict in the brain because it's got to figure out how to which sense to listen to and which one to ignore. And that conflict takes energy and it takes calories and it takes bandwidth that we don't have available for thinking and creativity and explosive movement. And so when we get those systems online and all working together, everything that we do is more efficient. In addition, if we think about aiming, when someone starts out shooting, they kind of bring the gun up and they find it with their eyes when it gets into their cone of vision. And then they do all of the sighting and aiming with their eyes and then verify and take the shot. What we want to do is have a presentation that automatically delivers the sights between our dominant eye and the target so that all we have to do is verify sight alignment and take the shot. And the reason this is important is if we take the beginning shooter that brings the gun up and then they're adjusting and doing everything, every time that you adjust based on what you see, it's going to take 0.2 seconds to 0.3 seconds, sometimes even a full second to see something, make a decision about what to do based on what you see, and then to actually take action on it. If we only have to do that cycle once, because all we're doing is verifying, we just slashed enormous amounts of time off of our time to being able to take an accurate first hit or of an accurate first shot.
I want to get a couple of devil's advocate questions out of the way in the beginning.
Yeah.
So one quick one. So I have 2. The first one is, how long have you been shooting?
Oh, good question. Since I was 4 or 5, I started doing IDPA when I was, that was probably 12 years ago. Did some action shooting before that with Polite Society and other action shooting groups. I shot my first Bug Nationals probably 2013, and then shot Bug Nationals and Indoor Nationals and a few matches like that.
Cool. So I'm looking at the website, and this is kind of the devil's advocate kind of tough questions I wanted to ask right away.
Yeah.
Because I look at your website, and it has a lot of numbers and it has a lot of information. Okay. So just kind of scrolling through, right? Improve shooting skills up to 288 times faster. There's one of them. And it says here, these are pretty outrageous claims. Am I exaggerating? More than 2,000 shooters who I've helped will tell you that I'm not. Right. And if you go down on the bottom, it continues to have some percentages and kind of some ideas of, before and after changes and improvements and all that. So I guess the question I have for you, Mike, is how'd you come up with all these numbers?
Oh, I don't know. I mean, I didn't come up with them. They were recorded from having shooters shoot before and afters.
Yeah. No, so don't get me wrong. I'm not saying you're making it up. What I'm saying is, like, how did you kind of come up with the thought of, like, hey, I have 2,000 shooters. Here's the percentages. Did you log all this stuff through from the time of, like, starting to teach people and get that logging?
There's different numbers or different groups. So there's people who I've worked with in person and run the before and after test with, and that was all recorded over time. Then there's over 2,000 shooters who have gone through my See Quicker, Shoot Quicker, basically the old version, the 1.0 version of See Quicker, Shoot Quicker. And so Does that answer the question?
Yeah,
Sorry. Yeah, that answers my question. It was just, anytime I look at like trainers, and Jeremy's mentioned this more than once, we'll find somebody like, I don't know, Brian Hill, for example. Man, here's this new instructor who's doing amazing. He came on the stage out of nowhere, right? And then you look at his history, and he's been doing coaching for, I don't know, 2 decades, 3 decades, right? And that's kind of where I'm going with the question of like, where did you come up with, where and how did you come up with all the information that you're selling and you're giving to the student to be like, man, this guy's legit? That's kind of where I'm getting at.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah. So there's a few. I mean, so I've trained with Wharton Neurology, with Z Health, and with Next Level Neuro, Sports Vision Pros, a few other neurological organizations or neurological education organizations. And if you look at professional sports and Division I sports, pretty much any team that is doing well is putting 6 and 7 figures into vision training and neurological training. So what I'm teaching is not unique. What I'm teaching is very unique to firearms training, and it shouldn't be. But if you look at any team that's won a world championship, they're doing what I'm teaching, or they're doing versions of what I'm teaching. The only people who aren't doing it are people who are using stuff that's using training techniques that are 10, 20, 30, 40 years old, and who just haven't changed as techniques and training methodologies have improved.
I want to dig into that. Before I do, you have a ton of great information, right? So if you go to visiontraining.com, and then, if you go to the bottom, there's a blog, and it brings up this entire other world of knowledge and articles that I can't imagine. I don't even want to begin to think about how much time and effort you've put into this stuff. But one of the things that so you have that training aid, that target behind you, right? You have the pop-up targets that I've seen before. You have the towel that you take with you,
the aux string.
Where the heck where's your store at? Like, where does that live?
I don't have a store.
No, like your website, the web store.
Oh, yeah, I don't have a store.
Oh, shoot.
I've got one website or one funnel for each product.
Okay.
There's no place where they all exist together.
Okay. I was like, man, I know you have a ton of stuff, because I see you put a ton of information out there, and it's the depth of information that you provide is not really, it's the exception, right? There are a couple other folks out there that when they share a bit of information, they go through and they really spell it all out from beginning to end. So dude, you're in my feed all the time. I've seen a bunch of the stuff that you have going on. So I should have asked the question when I freaking had it instead of putting it off. We were talking about performance training and vision training. That's what it was going to be. What challenges have you come up against kind of in the firearms world where this niche is of the vision training it's not, it's something where there's not a lot of folks out there that have this specialized training, that haven't devoted the last decade of their life getting the knowledge that you have. So it's going to be, the information that's presented in like a firearms course is going to be different, right? I've taken a couple performance-based pistols, and you get like the very surface level of it. What are some of the challenges that you're facing in kind of reaching the masses within the firearms training industry?
Well, there's a couple of things. One is belief, because like Andy said, the 288 times faster, that's unbelievable. That just doesn't happen. If you're doing the same thing slightly differently, you don't get a 288 times improvement. And I can tell you where that number came from exactly. Originally, I was talking with Carl Rain and asked him what a a number for a great improvement would be after a 2 or 3 day class in a shooter. And he said in his experience and with talking with other traveling instructors, it was 20% in 2 or 3 days, a 20% increase in speed and accuracy. And I was like, holy cow, that's the average improvement that I'm getting with this 3 to 5 minute sequence. So I did the math. What's 8 hours times 3 days times 60 minutes divided by 5 minutes, and it's 288. So that's where that came from. And that's real easy to verify with a group, because I've done it over and over and over again. But once I get through the belief that it's possible, there really isn't a problem. There is one other aspect, and that is that vision training has a lot of different meanings to a lot of people. So vision training could just be focusing on the front sight. It could be just doing near far drills or saccade drills. And it goes way, way deeper than that. You do vision training right, you reduce the amount of flinch that people have, or sometimes eliminate it, because of the way that eye movement impacts the midbrain and calms down the amygdala.
What's the best format for this information, right? And from your perspective, if you have somebody, or you have a group of folks, we have a group of shooters getting ready to shoot a USPS, like a high level USPSA competition match, or whatever it is, right? There's a group of 10 or 15 folks. What is the best way for you to reach them to where it's the most effective, right? Is it a class? Is it a seminar? Is it one-on-one online? What are the different ways that you're reaching folks on the individual level with this information?
Yeah, the best way to absorb information and the best way to habituate a new skill is frequent small block repetition over time. So that's one of the big reasons why I have so much training online and don't do as many 2 and 3 day live classes, because most of what you learn in a fire hose type class that lasts 2 or 3 days, it's stored in a part of the brain called procedural memory, and what you need is skills stored in declarative memory, and you need skills stored in procedural memory. And procedural memory is stuff that you can do, and specifically that you can do under stress at a fairly high level. And the best way to build that, again, is that frequent small block repetition over time.
That makes sense. When you're looking at vision training, what are some of once they get past hey, there's no way this is going to work for shooting, right? I see fine. I can see my front sight. I see my red dot.
Yep.
I'm target focused. Anyway, once you get somebody into the deal where they're like, okay, this is going to help me get that improvement that maybe some of these other classes aren't going to. What are some of the obstacles students are facing throughout the training process?
Oh, it really depends on the individual shooter, and it depends on what's going on in their brain. I mean, I was working with an aerial gunnery program, and which is engaging threats from helicopters. And the way that the training progression works is you basically, they start prone and shoot at a 50-meter target, point of aim, point of impact. And then they shoot from a chair, stationary. Then they shoot from a hanging chair. Then they shoot from a hanging chair on the back of an ATV, and then they go to the helicopter. Well, one of the guys, he was a sniper in the military. He was a law enforcement marksman, very good at what he did, nailed the prone shots, obviously, did great on the seated shots. As soon as he added movement to the mix, he imploded, dropped down to 20% hits, which wasn't good enough. And so I was behind him and I said, do you want to try something? And I said, all right, put your finger out in front of you and follow it to the right, follow it to the left, and back to the middle. And I said, was it choppy in one direction, smooth in the other? And he said, yeah, but how'd you know? And it doesn't matter. Here's what you're going to do. When you're approaching the target from the smooth direction, take the shot. When you're approaching the target from the choppy direction, swing through and take it from the smooth side. And instantly he went from 20% hits to 80% hits and was good to go. And then I gave him drills to smooth it out in both directions. And so what happens there, and aerial gunnery is an extreme example and it's cool and everything, but this happens a lot with shooting, making transitions, shooting plate racks, and doing things where somebody is very good in one direction and not so good in the other. And what happens a fair amount of the time is that one eye will move smoothly at one speed and the other eye will either be choppy or it'll move at a different speed. And so you end up, and it can be, they can work together in one direction and not work together in the other direction. And so you can end up with somebody being very good shooting from right to left and not good at all shooting from left to right.
It's funny you mentioned that because for me, it feels like if I'm going from left like this, I feel quicker. But when I try to do it, feels choppy, and I think I just kind of block that choppiness feeling out of it because I'm like, there's no way, right? Like it's there's no difference from turning my head to the, you know what I mean, from my eyes dotting from here to the right or here to the left. Well, yeah, well, man, that is that's pretty neat. And
you can have different parts of the brain. So you've got the midbrain turning the eye in, you got the pons turning the eye out, and you got the cerebellum, you got the frontal lobe starting the movement, and you've got the cerebellum stopping the movement at the right spot. And if any of those are off, you're going to have one eye start before the other. You're going to have a move at different speeds, or you're going to have one eye stop on the target and the other go past.
Man,
and
cool.
You can have one side of the brain working correctly and the other side of the brain underperforming, and it's absolutely fascinating. It's a deep rabbit hole, but it's so darn powerful because you can take somebody and watch them from behind and know what's going on with their eyes, and then tell them what to do to fix it, and just explosive gains in performance.
That's cool because when you were talking earlier about how, like, when new shooters especially, they're going from front sight to target, press the trigger, and they're doing all that stuff. It reminds me of a student we had on the line, a couple weekends ago, and I was telling her, I was like, hey, during that string of fire, that course of fire, whatever, you're firing that shot, you were probably focused on your front sight, then your target, then your rear sight, and at some point in that process, you started thinking about the trigger. And then the shot went off when it went off, and it wasn't where you wanted to be. And she was like, "Yeah, absolutely." And I was like, "You need to stop overthinking it, right?" And I didn't realize that there's a vision component to that, other than her thinking about what she should be looking at, right? Like in my brain, she's thinking about these different things that she should be thinking about, right? And she's just really blocking each one of those tasks off, and then when she tries to put them together, it creates a disconnect. And I not once did I stop until I was watching your video earlier today. I'm like, oh, wait a second, there's that, big dumb Jeremy, stop thinking, press the trigger, you know what I mean? And it's like that worked in that instance, but I'd imagine there's a lot of folks out there, and maybe guys are a little bit worse at it, right? Because female students tend to be a little bit easier to coach. They'll okay, let me trust the instructor. And guys will be like, stop thinking about it, just press the trigger. So it's interesting that is that's a block that's in there, right? And probably something that I think more instructors need to have a better understanding of, because it's not just a one size solution or one simple fix, right? Well, it could be, but there needs to be more than one. Like, hey, if it didn't work for her, then what's next? What it seems when you're sharing information online, they're reputable instructors that are usually jumping in and chiming in. and talking about, I guess, you, right? And that's where, when we're looking at folks to bring onto the show, that's one of the things that we look for. Hey, who are the instructors that we've had on before, or that we know are reputable people? And your name is the reputation that you have around this vision training is part of the hey man, this guy knows his stuff. He's out here putting the work in. And if you don't know, just go to visiontraining.com, find the blog, and it's freaking insane the amount of information that you put out there. Are you starting?
I was going to say,
that,
I think there's a mental part of this too, because it just, again, going
absolutely.
back, I saw a chiropractor today, right? And I'm laying there, and then he's like, "All right, I'm gonna crack your neck. Have you ever done that before?" And I said, "Yeah, I've done it a long time ago." And he's like, "All right, do me a favor, start wiggling your toes, wiggling your toes, wiggling your toes." And I'm like, "Okay, I'm wiggling my toes," and then all of a sudden, and I was like, "Oh, I see what you did there." And it's kind of along the lines of what Jeremy's talking about, of like switching your eyes from like target to front sight to rear sight, and we're not putting it all together, and we're forgetting about the trigger. And it's like, okay, now press the trigger. Then poof, all of a sudden all the sights and everything goes away, right? So there's a mental build-in of this stuff too, right?
Oh, absolutely. You can't separate the two. And there's some really cool stuff on how eye movement either pushes us towards a sympathetic state or a parasympathetic state, and makes it more likely or less likely that we're going to flinch. And one of the things that pushes us towards a sympathetic state is jumpy movements of the eyes, or saccades, or near fars. And you think about a new shooter going back and forth and back and forth and back and forth between the front sight and the target, that's activating a sympathetic part of the midbrain and making it more likely that they're going to flinch. And besides that, one of the things that happens every time we have a jumpy movement of the eyes, it's called saccadic suppression, and it's really cool. It basically, we have a time when we're blind every time that we shift our focus, and you can test this by setting up the camera on your phone
and then drinking, and then getting a flashlight. I'm just kidding.
No, so what you do is you hold it just under where you're looking, and look at yourself in the mirror, and go from looking at one eye to the other, to the other, to the other. And what you'll see is it'll look like somebody flipped a switch and the eye is instantly looking at the other eye, or at the other reflection. In reality, it moved, but we don't see that movement at all. And that blindness can last 0.1 seconds, 0.2 seconds, or more every time we shift focus. And it gets really, really frustrating for a new shooter when they're having that time of blindness they don't realize exists. They've got pressure to make the shot, and maybe their eyes aren't moving at the same speed, and they've got this ghost image of the gun or a ghost image of the target, and they're trying to figure all of this stuff out. And all of a sudden it's just like, ugh, gonna flinch and try and make it stop. And if we can get them to calm down, and with a red dot fixate on the target, with a laser fixate on the target, or fixate on the front sight, that fixation calms things down, and it basically activates the parasympathetic side of the limbic system, and makes it easier for us to press the trigger without flinching, going low left.
I heard, so for our listeners and our viewers out there, if you haven't downloaded the ASP Unlimited, the ASP Unlimited app, you should. And Riley Bowman talks about this briefly in his Pistol Intelligence IQ course, specifically about how the saccades and when your eyes are darting back and forth, which kind of leads me into my next question. As firearms instructors, I feel like there's this big void of information in the industry specifically related to vision, right? And it's probably through the conversation and just kind of watching and reading the information that you've shared for the last few years that I've followed you on social media. and stalked you in your neighborhood or whatever. But what is as firearms, what should firearms instructors be doing to I guess kind of fill that void, um, other than training with you and other than following you? What are some things, like, where are we missing this ball? Because if, when we're looking at the information that you present, and one of the things, on visiontraining.com, and I'm sure it's through your blog as well, you actually share the data, right? So you'll see before times, after times, right? Like, just performance metrics. Um, what what can the firearms training industry do to get a better understanding of this, and disseminate this information to the masses?
Um, well, honestly, the easiest thing is to have me speak at more conferences. And I do instructor development. Just finished up a class called Vision Training for Firearms Instructors. Had 27 instructors in it, and that was an awesome group of instructors. And getting ready to run that class again. And it's a 6-week online class that spreads the information out and helps instructors really get a handle on the visual aspects of shooting and what you can do with it, and the difference in how you use it with a group of 10 or 20 shooters on the line versus if you have a private client that you're working with, because there's obviously limitations on what you can do when you've got a bunch of people, as opposed to a single person or 2 or 3 people.
Hey, Mike, on the website, is this interactive, or is it you purchase? I believe it was $97, if that's correct.
Yeah, it depends on if you're talking about the instructor training or the one that's on visiontraining.com. The visiontraining.com training is it's a series of videos online, and then training tools that I send out to people. And the instructor class is live. It's live and interactive, and we're talking together on like we are here, and then interacting throughout the week on email and in a chat group to answer questions and go deeper into stuff.
Okay. And the other one is there's questions. It's just kind of like an email, and then you respond back for questions, or how does that work?
For the one at visiontraining.com?
Yeah, the one that's not live.
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay.
So you presented the See Quicker, Shoot Quicker seminar at the USCCA conference. Is that correct?
Yes.
Recently. Yeah. Let's talk a little bit about the makeup of that class. It was pretty cool to watch the video, man. And you can see, we talked in the pre-show about kind of just resetting and getting the 3 different systems kind of all on the same page. And you see, for me, when I was watching that video, the thing that really kind of was like, oh, that's cool to see, is you're working with a student one-on-one, or you're working with an attendee one-on-one. And he does the exercise, and then he's like, oh yeah. And then you see, like, it just kind of spreads throughout, where other folks are starting they're doing it and they're testing it out. So what was the makeup of the attendees of that seminar?
I'm not positive. I can tell you from the people that came up, it was at least 30%, if not 50% instructors.
I was going to say, I saw a bunch of firearms instructor like T-shirts and logos and stuff.
Yeah. It was great questions and great problems. I mean, that's always kind of fun. When I do the no, yes, ear to shoulder, and everybody's fixed, it's like, oh, that was boring. For me, it's fun when the basic drill doesn't work, and it's like, okay, I've got a group of 100 people that's watching me. Can I actually help this person? And fortunately, done it enough times and worked with enough people and run into enough problems that there's usually a pretty predictable pattern of what works and what doesn't work. And we're able to get people to where they can automatically deliver the sights between their dominant eye and the target very, very quickly.
Yeah, it's neat, man. Yeah, it's cool to see because it looked like it was a packed classroom, standing room only in there. And I noticed there were folks walking around with their instructor gear, and it wasn't just the. I'd imagine when you go to the conference, it's networking. So it was. I did pick up and notice that there were a bunch of instructors attending that seminar. On visiontraining.com, it talks about cross-eye dominance, and this is one of those things where there's some controversy around it because everybody has the different quick fix solution, right? Or the slow fix, right? Well, if you're right-handed and you're left eye dominant, well, learn to shoot with your left hand. And it's like, okay, this person's been shooting for 60 years. They're not going to be able to just become a left-handed shooter. And then it's like, well, then you shift the gun or you turn your head. What have you found? Can you go into details about cross-eye dominance and what you have found, or I guess dispel some of the myths around there? I don't want you to give away all the magic or the secret sauce, but I guess dispel some of the myths around cross-eye dominance and correcting it for folks or making it easier.
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the big things is that cross-eye dominance isn't a problem. It is. And the easiest way that I've found to deal with it is turn the head so that the dominant eye is lined up with the midline, and come up with the pistol in line with the midline, and then shoot. And some people prefer tilting the gun. You don't want to do an excessive movement with your head because it's very unlikely that you're going to be able to do it under stress. Larry Yatch, who's a Team 3 SEAL, or was a Team 3 SEAL. He had a stress shooting lab in Minneapolis where he ran about 140 classes a month for 3.5 years and tested a whole bunch of things. And both he and I, we decided that we were going to figure out how to shift our eye dominance on command and on demand. And we were both able to do it. And then we found out that it was just under low stress. As soon as the stress level reached a certain point, our brain would revert back to our original dominant eye. And that can be because of the angle that we're looking. And if that's the case, we can adjust it and we can tweak it. But sometimes it's just a matter of having the optic nerve from one eye to the visual cortex be one neuron shorter than the other optic nerve. So it's kind of crazy. But whatever your dominant eye, you really want to work with it. The bigger issue that I run into, a lot of people think they have issues with cross-eye dominance. There's 4 types of eye dominance that I test for. Right and left, which are the obvious 2. And then the other 2 are cyclopean dominance and unstable or mixed dominance. And cyclopean dominance it's really cool. Basically what happens is the 2 images from the eyes go back to the visual cortex, and the visual cortex combines those 2 images into a hybrid third image that doesn't exist in reality, and we try aiming with that image. And so take an aim with a blue gun. So this would be, if I'm right eye dominant, a cyclopean shooter aims like this. If you have them aim it at the center of a camera, the sights line up with the center of their forehead. And the problem with that is they can never get a true sight picture. So it's absolutely bizarre, but it's very, very common. It happens in 11% of the population. And rock string, or the ox string, normally takes care of that in between 2 and 10 minutes. And then they end up with stable eye dominance in one eye or the other, and they're able to deliver the sights between their dominant eye and the target, and speed and accuracy increases tremendously. The mixed eye dominance, what happens there is a good way to look at it is the brain's using 80% of one eye and 20% of another. And if you have somebody come up and aim the sights at the center of the lens of a camera, the reverse sight picture is going to line up with the corner of the eye rather than with one of the pupils. And with both mixed eye dominance and with cyclopean eye dominance, what you end up seeing is lateral stringing on the target, because the person's coming up and lining up the sights with a different point on their face each time they go to shoot. And it can be super, super frustrating for people. And the quickest answer is to close an eye. But the problem with closing an eye is that the body's not wired to close an eye under stress. And you really need to figure out how to deal with both eyes open shooting when things are calm and relaxed, rather than when lives depend on performance.
It's cyclopean dominance. I think, after hearing you talk about this, I'm pretty sure had a student on the range session before last where that was the vision issue. And it's funny because I'm sitting there and I'm like, I'm a tall guy. He was little. I'm like, you're not. He's telling me he's right-handed, right eye dominant, but the gun was
and
not
you're looking
in front
over
of
the top.
Yes, and the gun. I was like,
yep.
You're nuts, dude. You're certifiable right now. What the hell are you talking about? The gun is not in front of your right eye. And when you started talking about it, I'm like, oh my gosh, that's crazy. Man, that's
that kind of aha moment that happens all the time, because very few people talk about cyclopean dominance, how to diagnose it and how to deal with it. And so if you don't know that it exists, how do you fix it?
Yep. And I was sitting there thinking, I'm like, Andy's going to have to come over here, because his shots were off. And I'm like, Andy's going to have to come over here and fix this guy. And he's going to kick me off of this student, because we do that every now and then. It's to be like, hey, let me go over there and, work my magic with them. And I'm sitting there thinking, like, there's no way this guy is right eye dominant. That is, what are some of the other big vision things that you're seeing out there that's really going unnoticed?
One of the things is the interaction between vision and balance. And I don't want to use big words, but the vestibulo-ocular reflex. And vestibulo-ocular means basically inner ear and the eye. And that reflex is what allows us to shake our head or move our head and remain focused on something. It's what lets us ride a mountain bike on a bumpy trail. It's what lets us ride a car or drive a car and see things smoothly rather than all choppy. And that's out of whack in a lot of people. And the vision is doing a lot of the heavy lifting of balance. And the way that it does it is by figuring out where the horizon is and moving based on what the eyes see on the horizon. And that's what keeps us from falling. Well, you start trying to shoot on the move or move dynamically into position and take a shot quickly. And if the brain is using the eyes to not fall, it's not going to use them to aim. And our vision is going to go from smooth 4K HD to choppy 8mm home video. And so a lot of times we can improve visual performance, dynamic visual performance, by working on the inner ear. And the no, yes, ear to shoulder drill helps with that. But there's other ones that isolate the inner ear and let it do better at balancing us so that we can use our eyes for aiming and targeting and threat avoidance rather than for not falling.
And I was just so talking earlier, my kiddos were in vision therapy, and one of the things that they tested for was just that, right? They had them focus on a point, and then the therapist shook their head side to side, and they had a bunch of scientific things, and the different cameras that track their eye movement, and just the amount of improvement that I saw in there, because they spit out the data in a graphical interface form, right? So I could see like where their eyes were tracking, when they started the program 6 months in, a year in.
Mm-hmm.
And it's one of those things where like my son has graduated that program about a year ago so now, and I can still see the benefits of it. And then there are other days where I'm like, man, I might need to get this kid back in vision therapy. Like, but it's cool, man. This is really, like, I like to geek out on this stuff, but the problem that I have, and one of the things that I think about when I'd go and I'd be in the waiting room while they're doing their vision therapy session, I was like, man, I wonder, I was like, I'd imagine this would, if there was something for adults, and which is dumb because this is also for adults. There were adults in the program as well. But I'm like, man, I'd imagine this would improve my performance shooting guns and then just in day-to-day life. But again, it was like, man, how do I do it? Right. It's not, it's a lot different when I take my 5-year-old son in there and I say, hey, these are some of the things that I'm starting to notice, right? Like he would fall down or he would trip a little bit more often than I thought was normal. And a couple other things. And then with my daughter, one of the questions they ask in the deal is, their reading level. And I was like, well, she was above her reading level. And then the vision therapist, she said, same thing with her daughter. Her daughter was reading above grade level, but after going through the program, she was 1 or 2 grades even further ahead.
Yeah.
And it's so kind of following you, and it's still, there's this like reluctance, right? Because it does sound like it's too good to be true, right? Like it's not. Are you kidding me? I can do exercises with my eyes and my vision, and it will improve my athleticism. And I still have that reluctance after seeing my kids go through it, right? So we go to visiontraining.com. That presents us, we're presented with a series of exercises and videos and drills. Is that the training curriculum that you think is, hey, like this is step one like step one with the different programs that you offer and the different training that you offer? Where should somebody start with Mike Ox in this?
Yeah,
field?
that's so. On the visiontraining.com, just full disclosure on that, I wrote that page today for tonight. And the reason is, for the last 6 years, I've sold a training called See Quicker, Shoot Quicker. And the website looks like it's 6 years old, and it needed a refresh. And I updated the curriculum, and I am overlaying it on visiontraining.com and redoing all of the copy and everything. So what's on there is, there's going to be more on there. The training on the back end is good to go. It's set up. But yeah, the visiontraining.com, the See Quicker, Shoot Quicker program, that has basically the training that I use to go from having all of the vertigo and sensory problems that I was having to being normal and back in 10 years off the clock. And then the See Quicker, Shoot Quicker 2.0, which I just released, it goes into not a lot deeper, but more drills that are both shooting related and specifically geared towards other things in life. Better performance with driving, better performance with all ball sports, or anything where you're throwing. Better foot-eye coordination, better peripheral awareness. And the reason that that's important is, let's say somebody doesn't have peripheral awareness on one side. What's going to happen is the brain is going to think that it needs to tighten things on that side of the body because it doesn't have the advanced warning that it normally would. And so if we can increase peripheral awareness on that side of the body, a lot of times in seconds, we'll see shoulder drop and muscles relax on that side of the body because the protective mechanism doesn't need to be there anymore. Another thing having to do with what you're going through, Andy. So the vestibular system, now you could have a pinched nerve. That could be exactly what it is. But a lot of times what will happen is the inner ear, the vestibular system, will tighten all the muscles in the neck and upper back as a protective mechanism. And it is really, really common to do this anytime that you have ridden in something that goes more than 20 miles an hour for an extended period of time, because 20 miles an hour is about the maximum that we can propel ourselves. And so when the body is going faster than that, and it's not feeling the wind that it expects for that speed, and it's not feeling the other sensory input that it would have if it was moving itself, we get sensory mismatch. It's why it's so common to get a sore neck after a flight, either later in the day or wake up the next morning with a stiff neck. And the reason that we know this is because if you do the no, yes, ear to shoulder drills after a long car ride or after or during an airplane flight, the incidence of a tight, stiff neck and stingers and pinched nerves in the neck just tanks. So there's stuff like that in the See Quicker, Shoot Quicker course also that it really affects every area of life.
I just thought it was because my wife beats me all the time, and then I deserve. To be clear, I deserve it. So Mike, is there any other materials that come with this course? Do you get a aux string, or do you have to buy that separately, or what comes with the course?
Yeah, the aux string. What I try and do with my courses, there's whenever possible, I try and make them so that you don't need anything to use them, because I don't want them to be real gear heavy, because if you forget the gear and you need the benefit of the training, I don't want you to be stuck. So it does come with the aux string, but the aux string is really small so that you can carry it easily. And then it comes with vision training cards and tools that can fit in a wallet or a range bag that help you do the drills anywhere. And most of the drills you can do without anything, fortunately. But just with the aux string, you can work on near far. You can improve binocular vision, improve hand-eye coordination, improve saccade speed. It comes with over 20 drills to do with the Brock string, depending on what aspect of vision and shooting you want to improve.
I got two questions. The first question: sensory overload. I have a terrible fear. I'm afraid of heights. And a couple of years ago, I was on a work trip out to Vegas, and our outing was we were going to shoot machine gun from a helicopter, and I was like, so the thought of hey, I can't miss out on this experience. I don't care what it's going to do. I'm going to ride in this helicopter no matter what. So I got up there and I got in the helicopter, and there was no fear of heights. And the door gunner, my guy that was helping me out or whatever, make sure I didn't fall out of the deal, he's mentioned something about it being like the doors were open. Is that part of the deal, the sensory overload? Like I felt like what my brain thought I should be feeling, and it was, or is it just something completely unrelated?
So a lot of times what sensory overload is, it has to do with sensory mismatch. And if one eye is getting a different message than the other, and they're getting a different message than the inner ear, and that's not matching up with when you reach out to touch something and the something that you're grabbing for isn't there, that's what causes stress. If you're in a crowd and it gets more and more stressful, a lot of times it's because you can't discern which direction which sound is coming from, or may not have the ability to match up all of the things that you're hearing with all of the things that you're seeing. Something may sound like it's coming from here, but when you look, you see it over there, and that mismatch causes stress. And the more you add on, the more of a problem that creates. And that actually is a primary driver of behavioral issues in ADHD, in autism, in people recovering from TBIs and schizophrenia, in several conditions where sensory integration is an issue. And with ADHD in particular, there's been classrooms where they've done studies where they've taken classrooms where kids have had to be removed from the general classroom and put into a different classroom because of behavior issues. And they start doing a few minutes of vision drills per day with the kids who cannot be in the general classroom. And there's an 80% reduction in behavior issues, and the kids can go back to the normal classroom because the stress level has dropped down enough. Their sympathetic arousal has dropped, their amygdala is calmed down, and they're able to pay attention. They're able to stay still without fidgeting. They're able to read easier. Reading isn't as big of a threat to the ego anymore, and it can be absolutely life-changing.
It's I'm getting a ton of aha moments, right? Because I don't like crowds. I hate it. And every year we have Balloon Fiesta, which is it's the largest gathering of balloonists in the world. People come in from all over the world, right? And it's a great thing to go to, right? I have 4 kids, and I'm like, man, I can't rob them of this experience just because I don't like being around, 1,000 people. And so what I guess I find myself doing when it starts to become like I feel the anxiety amping up, I try to focus on something and single out like what they're saying and get that like auditory exclusion. I don't know if I'm using that correctly, but that'll typically help. Like if I let my wife and kids go 5 or 10 paces ahead of me and then I focus on them and I hear what they're saying, that typically I just kind of find myself calming down, and it's freaking, that's cool, man. How the heck do you execute everything? Before we do that, David Rogers says, great explanation, Ox. I've read your latest book. This is a great, simple way of explaining how the 3 systems have to sync to work together effectively.
Thanks, David.
Dude, how the heck do you execute everything that you execute? Do you have a team of like 100 people? Because I have a ton of great ideas. I have a ton of ideas, and Andy will tell you, I got 4 different fires burning right now. I got an app. I got a freaking light system. I got all this other crap. How the heck are you executing everything that you're executing? Because it's like you do the visiontraining.com and you're like, hey man, I just put together that website. I have a deck of cards. I have a set of cards that is included with it. How do you do it, man?
All I can say is focus. I mean, I've worked really hard. I've worked really hard to develop systems to create and maintain mental inertia so that I can pick something and then focus on it and stay focused on it for an extended period of time and make good progress, rather than my pre-neurology ADHD tendencies were boop, 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 boop all over the place. And I couldn't focus on anything. And now the ADHD that did suck is my superpower. And I'm able to just focus and go.
See, I'm completely opposite on that. When I have a task in front of me, I have to focus on that task and I have to get that task done. And if anybody kind of derails me, and believe it or not, I'm a manager, which I can kind of task switch, but if there's something in my personal life, it's like I have to get this done today. And if anybody gets in my way, I get, somewhat agitated. So I'm opposite of Jeremy. Jeremy's like all over the place. Like he just has little bubbles that pop out of his head all the time with ideas. And oftentimes me and him, like I have to slow him down too, but it makes a lot of sense. Just kind of going back to the Brock string. I just, another thing that just kind of popped in my head when we first started doing this, I was watching Chris Sinog, firearms instructor,
Chris is a good friend.
SEAL guy. Oh, okay. Yep. Yeah. And so he's the first one that I saw the Brock string use. And I'll be honest, in the beginning, I was like, do you really need all that crap, to shoot? And I'm, and now I'm sitting here talking to you about this ox string and all these things. It just has me really intrigued. And, I'm interested in learning more, honestly, Mike. So I appreciate your time on the show today and giving us this insight, because it's a lot. We always say this, you don't know what you don't know, but I think you've unlocked another level for us tonight on the show of just some more things that we need to look at as coaches and instructors.
It it goes back to what I was talking about at the beginning with we've got gear and we've got tactics and techniques, and that's where a lot of the focus is. And we need to focus on it. But all of that is built on a foundation of mental state control and sensory integration, particularly vision. And if we build on a foundation of sand, it's not going to be, we're not going to improve as fast, and we're not going to get as good as if we build on a foundation of rock. And so if we take a little bit of time to get the mental aspects lined up and get the visual aspects lined up and the other sensory aspects lined up, everything else that we do on tactics and techniques will be more efficient. We'll learn faster, we'll remember longer, and we'll perform better under stress.
I wanted to circle back. You were talking about your ADHD brain and how it's your blessing now, and I see it, man, and it makes a ton of sense because it's like any time that you share a nugget of information, you have kind of the solution or the training aid or something else to kind of solidify and make it accessible for other folks. The aux string is a perfect example of it. The training aid, the target that you have on behind you there, and you have a version of that that I feel like it was a something that, like, great marketers will tell you, make something for you and the masses will appreciate it, right? And that's kind of where I'm at with like the RangeBuddy app. It's like, hey, this is something that I want for me. And right, like the towel that you made, the towel specific, you're like, hey man, I'm on the road a ton. I don't want to necessarily, I have these other things, right? But this is something that I can take with me. I can hang it up over the hotel door, right? And I can do what I need to do. And it's cool to see that executed. And it kind of needs to light a fire under my butt because, like Andy said, it's like, dude, I got this other great idea. And I'm having to force myself. It's like, okay, let me roll out the next 4 updates that I want to roll out for the RangeBuddy app. And we were talking about the light system that I have. And I think I might have at some point shared a video of you with that. Right. And it's like, I'm 5 months out from, the next information that I get from the patent office. And I was telling Andy, I was like, thank God, because I'm nowhere near ready to put any time or effort back into that. Right. Man,
that's a struggle. They've gone through that a few times, and I feel your pain.
Yeah, it's like, man, let me finish executing this one. And it's cool. The RangeBuddy app is getting it's starting to get some good attention. And, Neil Widener at ASP, he's doing a series of videos on it. And it's really it's forcing me to stay engaged because it's all organic right now. And you have a background in marketing and copywriting. And I was talking to a friend of mine who's getting ready to venture off into kind of their own deal. And they have a marketing brain. And the adage is great marketing can kill a product or kill a business just as quickly as no marketing, and oftentimes faster, right? If you have crappy product out there, the more people that experience it quicker. So it's forcing me, with the RangeBuddy app, we're getting ready to roll out scoring systems that are specific to the individual target. So the IDPA targets will have the IDPA scoring system in there. The USPSA targets will have the USPSA scoring specific ones, the B8s, right, the steel targets. And there are a couple other big updates that I want to make to that app. I think the virtual instructor thing is one of the it's the coolest thing about that app. And I think it's one of the more difficult things to explain to people. I had a conversation with Neil on the phone, and towards the end of the conversation, I think I was finally doing a pretty good job of explaining exactly what it is. Because it's like, what do you mean it calls out random commands, or it'll show you a shoot or a no shoot image? But that kind of all came out of, as an instructor, I'm like, there's the only true statement about there's no shot timer in a gunfight is that the beep isn't going to be the go signal, right? You're still up against the clock, but it's not going to be the beep. It's not going to be threat, right? It's going to be a visual indicator, right? It's going to be
you got the rest of your life to figure it out.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, you have the rest of your life to figure it out. And it's like, man, what is a simple way to to kind of give people the opportunity to see what their response to a visual stimulus is going to be, and what does that look like. And I'm like, well, everybody has a phone. Most people have an iPad or a tablet, right? So with the virtual instructor, you can enable the shoot or no shoot images, and it'll briefly flash, quarter second, half a second, or whatever on there. So before we wrap up, is there anything that we should have talked about with vision training, visiontraining.com, anything Mike Ox related that we should have talked about that we haven't touched on yet?
Not unless there's questions I can answer for you.
Man, I think you've done a great job. And again, each one of these episodes, there's some aha moments, and it's, the last couple episodes that we've had on, we've had a couple instructors like Kent Hauer of Green Mountain Defense and John Hearn, and they were really talking about, just thinking with the gun. So there were some great aha moments in there. And then now when we're talking about vision therapy and really, like Andy said, that whole other thing that is unlocked and opened up now. It's a can of worms, but it's a great can of worms that I'm interested to get into. So I'm looking forward to signing up to the vision training and really diving into that, because it is, both of my kids have graduated from the vision therapy, but every week I'm like, man, I wonder how this would affect firearms. And with the stigma around firearms, the last thing I wanted to do is walk into a medical professional's office and be like, hey, how can I apply this to guns, shooting guns? So it's so cool that these worlds should have coexisted, but how these worlds are kind of starting to collide and come together. And it's
the other thing, if you go into, vision therapy is, from doing it with your kids, depending on where you're at, you're looking at $3,000 to $9,000. And it's it's not the least expensive thing to do.
Yeah, it's thankfully my insurance covered most of the kids. But yeah, I can imagine, right? It'd be like, hey, you don't really need this. We're not covering anything. And then the therapist would be like, yeah, you can pay for it out of pocket. And again, it's not something that I feel like, because they would go for an hour and then they were sent home with a bunch of different assignments. And it's, fortunately for me, my wife handled 95% of that. Unfortunately for me, is my wife handled 95% of that stuff. So I really wasn't involved in it as much as I could have been or should have been, just from like a selfish standpoint on how can I apply this to what I do. But it sounds like visiontraining.com is going to be the kind of susses out and weeds out the other stuff, right? Because that's the other thing, right? Like, I don't necessarily need all the stuff. I just want the stuff, the low-hanging fruit that's going to give me the most bang for the buck. And you spent the last 10 years, it sounds like, going through all of that and really compiling and curating the best resources and packaging it in such a manner that makes sense to us dumb gun dudes.
I wouldn't take the dumb gun dude too seriously, but
no, absolutely not. I think the intelligence, the IQ in the gun industry has gone up tremendously. I've said we are in the golden age of training within the firearms industry right now. And it's partly because we have a lot of great instructors that are coming up and they're seeing the defensive side, the performance side of it. But we're also starting to see some of these worlds collide and come together, where we're talking about vision training. And that I don't want to say it's the last like kind of frontier in this deal, but I think it is the one that we really haven't started to look at as an industry, and we really haven't figured it out. Right. So it's going to be really interesting where you're putting on the vision training for firearms instructors, and how those group of instructors and the next group of instructors who go through and receive this information from the perspective as an instructor, and how do we make our students better by providing this information, and really what that's going to do to the industry and how it's going to raise the standards. So it's an exciting time to be in the industry for me, as it is for you, I'm sure.
Yeah, absolutely. We should probably do something vision related in your app.
Hey, I'm open for it. I'm open for it. I think it will integrate well with the target that you have behind you. I don't know how you use that target, but for me, with the random commands, right? It's you have the shapes, you have the colors, or there numbers and letters behind it there.
Oh, wrong way.
Oh yeah. Yeah, that is awesome. Yeah, and
Yeah, so there's all sorts of things you can do on there depending on what part of the brain you want to impact. And that sounds geeky, but basically there's things that you can do at the beginning of a training session to release dopamine and help you learn faster. And there's things that you can do at the end of a session to help make what you did during the session stick longer afterwards.
That's cool, man. Hey, I want to give you and our listeners the rest of the evening back. I can't thank you enough for jumping on.
Oh, thank you, Jeremy.
Yeah, absolutely. I look forward to having you back on because I'd imagine with everything that you have going on, I would definitely love to. I think if we could have, I think a great episode at some time in the near future would be the vision training for firearms instructors. You know, once these guys get out there and have some time to put the rubber to the road, I think it'd be really cool to see how this stuff is impacting folks. And it's great to see. It excites me when there's somebody that's got a decade or more experience and out there sharing the information in an easily accessible manner, because it's great to go shoot I was like, man, I like taking gun classes, but I am in it for the classroom portion of it. Really, like that's where I kind of geek out and get most excited for. So if I'm taking a class and they're like, yeah, it's a 2-day class and it's going to be 8 hours in the classroom, 8 hours on the range, I'm like, that is awesome. So the fact that you have the training available online where folks can access it and do it from the comfort of their home when they're ready is super freaking cool. So with that, remember, it's your life, it's your safety and protection. Y'all stay safe